We're good. All right. So thank everyone for being here this morning on a nice, getting colder, at least in New York, Saturday morning. I'm really excited at today's talk and what we're going to be talking about and our host of our conversation today. So I will introduce her. So Emily Coccia is the Vice President of Special Projects for WEConnect International. Just to kind of give you an idea what WEConnect International does, they identify, educate, register, and certify women's business enterprises based outside of the United States. And they make sure that they're at least 51% owned, as well as managed and controlled by one or more women. And then they connect them with multinational corporate buyers. So they're really trying to economically empower women in the business sector. So Emily herself is a successful nonprofit strategist and executive with more than 15 years of experience. Through her work at Good 360, an international nonprofit responsible for connecting large corporations with access products to organizations and schools in need, she engineered and implemented custom sustainability and corporate social responsibility programs for several Fortune 500 companies. And she's also, I love that she put this in her profile, she has also founded PWG DC, a professional women's group in Washington, DC, to support the community through peer mentorship. So today, for all of you entrepreneur enthusiasts, or if you've ever thought about it, she's here to talk about women in business and removing barriers to thrive in the business sector. So I will kick it off to her, and then please do hold your questions for the end. We'll leave plenty of room. And yeah, over to you, Emily.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you, Jessica, and the whole Zahara's Dream team for having me today. I'm so excited to be here and be chatting with you. And also thank you for the gracious welcome and introduction. That means that I basically get to skip like a whole slide in terms of my deck, which is always fun to do. So what I first want to do is just kind of gauge who we have in the room, in the virtual room, so to speak. So does everybody have the ability to put things into the chat box? And can you tell me where you're from, where you are within your career? So for example, are you just starting out? Are you looking for something new? Are you retired? Whatever it may be. And then a little bit about what industries interest you. That could be industries that you already work within or industries that you're interested in. So if you wouldn't mind just putting a couple of those things in the chat box, if you're able to, then I can see a little bit about who we have in the room here today. Don't everybody type at once. Okay, I'm not able to see any chats. Here's one, yay. California, okay. Freelance at the UN in New York, excellent. That's really interesting. We do a lot with the UN, and there's a whole slide in here from the UN, so yay. Great. Italy, my family is in Italy. That's where I'm originally from, even though I don't look like it. That's great. Environmental and energy law, awesome. Renewable energy, Nigeria, excellent. We have a lot of programs. And if you're not already on mute, if you can make sure that you are on mute, please. Excellent, thank you. Okay, great. Yes, my last name is very obviously Italian. Okay, fantastic. So we got South Africa, we got Nigeria, we got Italy, we got places in the US, Boston, California. This is fantastic. This is exactly what is extremely helpful for me. So feel free to keep putting them in there. I may reference some of the places and some of the different industries that you're all mentioning here. That's really helpful to have. Oh my. We're going to start a dance club here today. All right, whoever's on iPhone 8 on the screen, I think you keep coming off mute. So not that I mind the dance music in the background. That's similar to how I would like to be presenting anyway. Okay, moving right along. So a little bit about me. This is a slide that I get to skip because Jessica did a fantastic introduction, but what I will just add is that really my background is in creating custom global philanthropic programming for large corporations and organizations. And within that, throughout my career, I've been heavily involved in women's issues. And through that, typically find that the majority of those issues stem from a lack of economic independence, a lack of education, and typically those two things go hand in hand. As Jessica mentioned, I'm currently working at WEConnect International, where we do help more than 10,000 women entrepreneurs in more than 100 countries connect with each other and then connect with large corporations in order to get contracts. So when we talk about entrepreneurship, we don't just want to talk about artisans or people who go to their local market to sell, handcrafts. That is a wonderful way to be an entrepreneur. But what we have found is that we want those women to think even bigger. We want them to think about, how would I sell these textiles or these items globally? How would I tap into an ExxonMobil or a Procter & Gamble or somebody who's going to give them a really large contract? Because what we find is that in receiving a really large contract like that, that gives women the opportunity to invest back in their community. It allows them to create things like manufacturing plants in their hometown that will then employ many of the people within their hometown. And that really starts to impact the economy and really build strong communities. So we see entrepreneurship, especially for women, in leading into that piece of it. So that's our ultimate goal, is to get them big contracts with big organizations, global organizations, so that they can make a big impact on their community. And that helps in all areas of economic empowerment and advancement. So that's a little bit about me and what I do at WEConnect International. So what I want to talk a little bit about are the barriers. And I'm going to invite you all again, especially I see that there are a number of people who have been in the workforce for a while. So you are women in business if you are working. So you're already women in business. Have any of you experienced significant barriers or certain things that keep you from doing your day-to-day job? And if you want to throw some of those into the chat, please do so. Because I know that as women, we come across these barriers in our own lives every single day. So go ahead and throw some of the barriers you've experienced into the chat, and I'll be able to check them out. But then we'll also, for the rest of the group, read the other barriers that other people are talking about, because this is something that will, when we start talking about removing the barriers, we really have to have an understanding of what those barriers are. So toss them in the chat. I'll give you a moment to do so. I like things to be a little more interactive. I want to make sure that you all are smart, independent individuals. And so your voice is really important to this conversation as well. And again, don't all type at once. I think there's a little bit of a lag. So I'm going to take a sip of my coffee while you throw some in there. And don't worry, if you don't have any to list, I have a bunch of them. So. All right, while you're doing that, we'll go ahead and just keep moving on the presentation, but please feel free to continue the conversation. Yeah, lack of access to information, that's a great one. We're gonna talk a little bit about that today, so. Excellent, yeah, go ahead and throw them in there. We'll address them on one of my future slides here. So, women in business, it's a very, very broad topic. And actually, when deciding to have this talk with you all today, I really struggled even up until late last night, thinking to myself, am I talking about the right parts and pieces? There's just so much to add. How do we possibly address any of this in an hour, let alone in a day or a year? So it's really hard to have some of these conversations because the women in business is just such a very broad topic. And therefore, so is the conversation around the barriers. And therefore, so is the conversation around how to remove the barriers. So to add to your list here, age-related discrimination, excessive competitiveness, lack of access to information for professional development. So adding to that list, I want to talk a little bit about some global stats. Obviously, you are all from different parts of the world. And so I think it's really important to just kind of create some context around some of the things that we're talking about globally. So there's a lot to read on this slide because there are a lot of different types of barriers. And these numbers get better or worse for each of your current countries versus where you were born, developing countries versus developed countries. They depend on the industry, ethnicity of women, or other minority statuses like LGBTQ or people with disabilities. But what I really want to highlight on here is the pink upper right-hand corner that you'll see on your screen. If women had the same opportunity as men to participate in the market, global GDP could rise from 3 to 6%, which equals 2.5 to 5 trillion US dollars. And also in the lower right-hand corner, that yellow square, women account for more than $20 trillion in consumer spending per year and are involved in 80% of the purchasing decisions worldwide. So why is this important? It showcases how important women in business are to the global landscape, not because it's the fair or right thing to do, not because we happen to be 51% of the population and therefore should participate in that manner, but because it's really good for business, like really good for business. Trillions and trillions of dollars, good for business. And not only is it really good for business, but if you look anywhere online, you will see that women's economic equality is correlated in tons of studies through actually a significant span of time now, that the economic equality is correlated from everything from better educational systems to more stable communities to less domestic violence. And even recently, a study came out that correlates women's economic equality with peace. That's a really big deal. This is really big impact when we empower women financially. So not only that, and for the freelancer that helps out with UN, you probably have seen this a lot. But not only is it really good for business, and these are, so first let me just kind of level set. Some of you may or may not be aware of the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, as we all kind of acronym them out. So I won't spend a ton of time on these because I do know many of you probably know what these are, but for those of you that don't, very, very simply, they are a set of recommendations that came out of the UN, meaning nearly 200 countries came up with a list of recommendations and a list of goals to help essentially make the world a better place and to create a tracking mechanism to get there. So again, that is my very simplistic way of describing it for the sake of time, and we don't want to dive too deep into it. But if you aren't aware of the Sustainable Development Goals, I highly recommend that you take a look at them because they're really interesting, but they give us a really good guidepost for where we should be by the year 2030. So they're also very lofty goals. And if you look at where we're at so far to those goals, we're lagging on a lot of them. And I think it's really important, and this is why I'm so excited to have this talk, is it's really important for us to start doing things that really move these forward. The other thing that I want to mention about the SDGs and why I really bring it up is because within each of these goals, they have very specifically spelled out how each of the SDGs impact women. So if you really want a full list of all the global barriers and issues that span all regions, all ethnicities, all minority statuses, et cetera, then you will see them reflected in each of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So now let's get into some more of the good stuff. What can we do to remove these barriers? You are all women, as far as I've seen so far in the participant list. So this applies very directly to each of you. And I wanted to take some time to turn these big global problems, these huge tasks, these huge things that we need to solve in order to make things better for women in business. I want to turn them into tangible, manageable things that each of us as individuals can do to thrive in business ourselves, but also in doing so, remove the barriers for others. As we've already discussed, we don't just know what the barriers are, we live them every single day. And I'm not gonna lie, many of us are really tired of talking about it. We don't wanna just talk about the barriers. We don't wanna talk about all the things that are wrong. We don't wanna talk about all the solutions, but then not see any change. So what I really wanna do is make sure that I'm turning these really, really big things into small, chewable, bite-sized pieces for us, knowing that they can make a much bigger impact. So apologies ahead of time. I am about to give you all a little bit of a to-do list, and hope that you'll join me in taking some of these actions if you haven't been already. And I think that as we kind of go through this to-do list and get toward the end, I'll start to tie it back into how that impacts the larger concepts, especially around women's economic empowerment. So here's your to-do list, starting with number 1. And this actually goes really well with, I think it was somebody from Zahara's Dream that put this in the chat, but this goes really well with the concept of like being aware and having an understanding of what the barriers are and how to find opportunities. So part of the reason I share the global stats is to help you understand the landscape. As individuals, it's really important that you continue to learn. We all know that. Learn everything. Learn new skills, learn about the world, learn about opportunities, and understand also that and this goes for everybody. It's really a good idea to understand that we are all at different parts of the journey. You see that regionally, you see that again, as you look at stats and where people are in kind of the journey of how important women's economic empowerment is, or economic equality is, you see that everybody really is at a different place in their path, even as individuals. So when I was growing up, I think that it was easier for me, never easy, but easier, because gender roles in my household were really fluid and non-traditional. So my parents both worked, and for a significant amount of time, my mother had a more stable and better paying job. My parents both at different times put us to bed, made us dinner, did household chores, or mostly made me and my brother do the household chores. And every week we had dinner at my grandparents' house, and we have a really large Italian family. And so we would all be there. And all of my aunts and uncles, they all played different roles in their own households. So when I started my journey of learning and understanding, I started at a very different place because I already knew I could stay home with a family if I wanted to. I could go to college if I wanted to. I could make a lot of money. I could ultimately do what I was passionate about. And knowing that I had options meant that I could make a choice that was best for me. So understanding the options open to women in business is the first step. They need to know what they can do and that there are gazillion opportunities out there for them. So the next thing I want to talk about, and that's on your to-do list, is connect. The best advice I ever received is go, you never know who you're going to meet. And I saw on the Zahara's Dream website content about creating opportunity for women. That's so important. That's so huge. And as an individual, it's also about knowing where to find opportunity, like Zahara's Dream or WEConnect International, organizations like that are out there creating these opportunities. It's also about knowing how to identify things that are opportunities. What does an opportunity look like? Can I do this? And then to know what to do with that opportunity. So with all those things, the best way to really start this, I feel, and from my what I started doing and what worked for me is to say yes to everything. So a friend invites you to meet up with people that you don't know, of course, when it's safe, after COVID-19 or with a mask if it's during COVID-19, say yes to that. If you are offered a new project to work on or a volunteer opportunity, say yes. You're invited to join a social group, say yes. When I graduated from college, I applied to, I don't know, hundreds of jobs, hundreds and hundreds, all over the US, all over the world. I was very open to opportunity and really wanted to get out of my parents' house. But at doing so, after I finally got a job, what I learned was that the reason my resume actually ended up on the top of the pile, other than my qualifications, because those matched as well. But it was because the woman reviewing the resumes noticed that one of my references listed on my resume was the best friend of the man she was dating and is now married to. I knew him from my hometown in Michigan, which for those of you that aren't in the US is in the middle of the country. And the job was in Virginia, 3 states away. So you never know where these connections will lead you. You don't always know when a connection is going to get you your next opportunity. And so for women in business, it's really important to make as many connections as possible. And of course, you don't want them to be insincere, but I think that saying yes as often as you can to ways of connecting with individuals and new opportunities, it's just so important. So moving right along here on your to-do list. The next thing I want to talk a little bit about is adapting. So in my role at WEConnect International, as I mentioned, I work with women entrepreneurs around the world. And I think that based on what some of the folks put in the chat function earlier, there's probably a number of you who are entrepreneurial in some way, freelancer, for example, or might be interested in starting your own business at some point, or just really like to solve problems. And maybe you're either an entrepreneur or you would like to be an entrepreneur. So for those of you that are interested in things like that, this is a little bit for you. So what inspires me every day in my role is watching women business owners' minds work. Their initial reaction to any problem is just to solve it. So something doesn't work, you fix it. Or there's a big issue in your community, you build a product or service in order to accommodate that. The entrepreneurial spirit is really important to innovation, because what this means is that you see a problem and you just immediately have something to solve it. So when we talk about adapting, I personally have seen that women entrepreneurs really kind of do it best, especially because women have a lot of experience with multitasking and taking a lot on. They fit a lot into their day. So nothing against male entrepreneurs. They are also very innovative, and they have amazing ideas and do amazing work. But I will say not as many of them are also doing things like running a household, or volunteering at, their child's school. A lot of them do, and things are changing. So there is nothing, I don't ever want to say women are better than men, but we tend to fit a little bit more into a day based on a lot of people's experience. So what I will also say in terms of the women entrepreneurs that I work with on a regular basis is that in terms of adapting, where we have seen this a lot is following and now in the middle of COVID-19, especially around the world. So we survey our network each quarter since COVID hit in order to check in on them. And we check in on them in terms of how they're doing as individuals, but also within their business and what types of support they need, because our world, all of us as individuals, our world is constantly changing every day. A lot of us don't know what to expect when we wake up tomorrow. And that is a very stressful time period for individuals. It's especially stressful for those that are running their own business and they have no idea what their business is going to be tomorrow. And that's their livelihood, and that's how they put food on their table. So the survey has pulled out a lot of interesting things, and hopefully you had a chance to read some of them while I was talking. But the thing that I want to highlight is that increasingly each quarter, more women are identifying and cutting expenses. They're creating new business opportunities due to what's happening around them, and they have launched new products and services. So adapting to the problems in any setting, in any role throughout your career, even if you're not a woman entrepreneur and you work within an office or you have a team or you're just starting out in your entry level, becoming the person that solves problems for an employer, for a customer, for a client or a partner, that's how you become invaluable, and that's how you advance in business. And as you adapt, it's really important to also keep true to the kind of professional that you are and that works for you. So number 4 on your to-do list is to be authentic. I share these pictures of myself to illustrate that what this can actually visually look like. On the left, obviously you see that I have purple hair and I'm in a tutu and I'm laughing. That photo was a couple of years ago. I was working at a creative agency. And when I was interviewing to be a part of the leadership team at WEConnect International, I still had purple hair through that interview process. I was meeting with corporate 500 representatives who were part of the board and the CEO at WEConnect International as part of that interview process. Again, all with purple hair. And when I was offered the position, which was because of my skill set and because it was a good fit, I was also asked if I thought, based on the role, would my purple hair get in the way of the job I had to do? And my response to that really was, yes, I think it will. With the partners I would be working with and the role I wanted and the situation I was in, I did think that it would make things harder, not easier. That was because my purple hair and all the other colors I had before the purple, I was okay with changing it because that was just an outward facing way to show my love for creativity, my colorful personality. And those things I still use in my work every day. So I don't need purple hair to still be those things. And so as an individual and as a woman in business, you get to decide where to be adaptable while still carrying the qualities that are true to you and find where they fit, because there really is no one kind of woman in business. And I talked very specifically about like a physical attribute, but this plays into really anything about yourself. What things are you willing to adapt because they help you more in a situation? You know, there are certain times, especially as you grow in your career, maybe going and getting a glass of wine with some of the people you manage isn't going to be a good idea. For those of you that like to go do happy hours with work. or or really just any social setting. So there are certain decisions that you have to make as you grow in your career and as you grow as an individual in order to, determine which things are actually core to you. I laugh a lot at work. I'm a very sarcastic person. Those are attributes about myself that don't always fit well into a professional setting. But I also found that sticking true to some of those things, at least at certain times and with certain team members and with certain partners, it's actually made me a stronger professional. So again, I think these are kind of some individual decisions that you make as you go through your career. But to me, that's really important, to be authentic, because what that is really going to help you do is bring others along with you, which is the other thing on your to-do list today. So it allows others to realize there are different ways to be effective leaders. It helps spread innovation. It shares new perspectives. It creates more space for new ideas, new ways of doing things, and proves to others that women in business continue to come in all different sizes, shapes, colors, backgrounds, all of that. And actually, a really good example of this is we can start to see this in the STEM sector. So the science, technology, math. Women are typically underrepresented in these areas. But now that this is starting to get a little better, that it's any of the stats that show us that this is starting to get better, what that's really because is young women are able to see themselves reflected in the women we showcase in leadership roles. So by being authentic to yourself, you actually chart a path for others just by being yourself. And that's really important. And one of the things I wanted to share too that came out of this COVID survey that we did with our women entrepreneurs is this quote that's on the screen, and you've probably read it by now. But the biggest piece of it from this woman's perspective is actually the second half of that. The more that she provided help to her network, to the people that needed it, the more leads she got for her business. So bringing people along isn't just important for them. It's really important for you. So even to the point in one of the chats about excessive competitiveness happening with women. So when you go by country, this is a little different. That some countries, women are extremely competitive. And that's because they haven't been reflected in any role in business prior. And so when they get there, they want to keep that spot because there's not many of them. So they want to keep it. And if they're not there yet, they're racing people for it. And so that excessive competitiveness comes because there just haven't traditionally been places for women in business. But what I would like to say is that the excessive competitiveness is not beneficial to anyone, including yourself, because it becomes apparent that the more people that you bring up with you, the more leads you'll have, the better connections you'll have, the more business you'll have, the more innovation you'll have for your own, whatever you're creating or whatever role you take. Those other perspectives and having really smart, strong people in your corner, they're just going to help you be that much better at your own role, as well as in business in general. And don't worry, I'm nearly done because I do know that we have to save time for questions, and I'm really excited for that part as well. So I only have, I think, maybe just kind of a little bit of a closing right here. Yes, because I'm taking it back here. Okay, so I've talked a lot. And now you hopefully have some tangible steps women can take to change the course of business and therefore create global impact. It's not going to be easy. It never is. It's going to be easier for some than others based on where they already are in their journey, or based on, and that can be within industry or, the country you live in. So like I said, it's going to be easier for some. I I have gotten really good at claiming my privilege. I've been really privileged, and that gave me a step up from others. It's also not always going to be fair, but as I mentioned before, the numbers are on our side. Women are 51% of the population. So if we all decide that we want every leader who runs every country in the world to have purple hair, for example, if we all agree on that one fact, just by sheer numbers, we can probably make that happen. So I take it back to the ability for each of us as individuals kind of following this to-do list to really be able to make a much bigger impact on the globe. And the last thing I'll share is that what I would like to say is when all of you, because you are all smart individuals, I can tell by the 4 people who threw something into a chat function, is that when you're being interviewed by the media after some big event or after launching some innovative product and they ask you how you did it, my last learning to share with you is not to start your response with, "I've been so lucky." We hear this so often. I've just been so lucky. I said it earlier that I've been privileged and that started me on my journey, but it's a lot of work. So it didn't magically happen to you. I just gave you a huge to-do list, which are actually really big tasks. So it's really important to remember that it's not luck, it's you. You worked really hard. And the only way others will know how to get there is if you share your path, if you give them a map. It may not work perfectly for them. Things I shared today are not going to work perfectly for each of you, but you can use what I've shared to create your own map. And that's how you as an individual actually remove barriers for women in business. So thank you for listening. I talked a lot, as I've said already. Jessica, I imagine you probably have a way that you like to do the Q&A portion. But while we're doing that, I will also just keep up on the page my contact information so that you can all look me up and connect with me on LinkedIn. You have my email address. So even after this Q&A section, I'm always available to have conversations. So turn it back over to the Zahara's Dream folks.
Yes, thank you so much for the wisdom that you've shared with us all today. I think we're all just taking in our to-do list, and I've really been reflecting on, what Zahara's dream is also trying to provide in this journey, in trying to build understanding and connect to build opportunities to kind of help, whether it's through an entrepreneurial lens or just an overall career. I was really just personally resonating with the be authentic step. I know, especially as young women, we struggle with, trying to become the mold of what people want us to be in the workplace rather than being authentically us. It depends on the job that you're in, the stakeholders you're trying to influence, that kind of determines how much or how little, you can show of your true self. But something that I've really learned over the past couple of years is just how unwilling, I guess the older I get, the unwilling I am to change a lot of my personality traits. And I hope others will do the same, continue to be you. But like Emily said, just know your audience at times. So that way you can get further with what your goals are. And obviously bring others along with you is what we're doing here, trying to create opportunities for everyone. So I agree. It's not luck. It's a lot of hard work. And I'm really excited for everyone who may have questions for Emily for your own careers or for your own advice in going forward with this talk. So if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand in the chat box and we'll call on you. Don't be shy.
No questions means that everybody already has been doing all these things, and I apologize for reiterating all the same information you probably already know.
Well, I'll go ahead and start off a question while people are thinking about it. with the pandemic this year, COVID-19 has really impacted women's ability to be able to thrive as entrepreneurs, or even in the business place, the workplace. So what has WEConnect International been doing to kind of address some of these issues that have been coming out? What have you been hearing as far as impact on women's entrepreneurship? Anything related to that would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And like I had mentioned, we've been doing a quarterly survey, and that's given us a lot of really good data, because we have a network of more than 10,000 women entrepreneurs. Of course, you don't get all of them to respond to a survey, but we do have a really good sampling of our network, and we are consistently asking them, what are your biggest issues? What are things that we can do for you right now? And I think what we have seen the biggest impact on is, especially in cultures that rely very heavily on in-person business. So meeting up for tea or coffee with, with other potential clients, going to events like big conferences or trade shows, or wherever you go to kind of showcase either your product or your service, even as much as going to a small marketplace in your hometown where you sell something. Those aren't those aren't places you can necessarily go right now. So I think it's really what we've seen a lot of is, how do you take what you do digital? And I actually see this as a real benefit for a lot of our women entrepreneurs who are who have been so reluctant to take things digitally, because of the fact that they like doing in-person business. Like, they want to talk to each other. They want to make connections in person. That's how, especially culturally, a lot of us have done it in the past. And so what we've seen a lot of changing is that even within places like, for example, Bangladesh, where we had always had trouble doing anything online with our women entrepreneurs there, that they are now online. I mean, areas of Bangladesh are actually now looking at 5G network because of the fact that they've seen such an influx of the digital capacity needed in households. So I actually look at this as not just we can't wait to go back to normal, but we're creating a new normal. And I actually think that silver lining, and maybe I'm being overly hopeful, but I do think that women taking their business digitally is what's really going to help with expanding their business, because it's going to give them more access to global opportunity, more access to reach people in the United States when they're, in any of the countries you've all listed. If you're able to sell products and services online, you're able to just reach more people. But it's also about carving out how to do that effectively, because now you have, millions of individuals that could have eyes on you. How do you find a way to have your own authentic voice amongst all those other voices? That's really difficult. So I think we'll see a really significant transition, and we're already seeing it. And we have more stats, just so you're all aware, if you want to check them out after, on our WEConnect International website. So WeConnectInternational.org. We have our last 2 survey results up there. And then we also have some of the survey results already filtered out by country. So you can take a look at, what's really happening with women entrepreneurs around the world.
Yeah, I think a really good question in the chat box.
Let's read it. Hardware, ICT, backend, infrastructure. Yes, taking its sweet time. Let's see, being undermined. Yes, okay. That's a really great question. I think that it's probably best to not, in a professional setting, ever tell somebody to go jump off a volcano and camp there. That being said, I know that sometimes people also do need to hear that. So when we talk about how to adapt and, you know, how to be authentically you, I'm going to start with do what feels right for you. But I do think that in terms of what we've seen, especially in areas where women aren't typically there. So in a room full of people, it is most often a table full of men. Any industry that is like that, having a woman then sit at the table is jarring. People don't understand it. They haven't seen it. This goes back to actually really my first item on the list of understanding. It's not just women that have to understand what the landscape looks like. It's everybody. We all need to have an understanding of what it looks like and what it can look like. So as an individual, I think the thing that I have taken most in my own individual career, and mine is very different than yours, in that, especially in the nonprofit sector, women are there a lot. White women, especially like me, are there a lot. It's traditional, especially in the US. We see this very often. So for me, I wasn't a weird person sitting at the table. And so, but I do want to say that there have always been times where it actually happens to me fairly often when I'm working with a number of like the large corporations, for example, is that my ideas or my voice is not always heard, whether I've just said the right thing or not. And then you may find that somebody else is saying the same exact thing, but their voice is heard just because of how they look, especially if they're a male, and people are more often expecting to hear from men. So that's a long-winded way of actually getting to my point. The point is, the thing that has always worked for me is facilitating that conversation and facilitating, that's always the word I use for it, but bringing people to the point that they can hear you is one of the things I strive to do often. So if you come in yelling, just because your volume is loud doesn't mean that anybody can hear you. So I think it's understanding who you're talking to, listening to what their concerns are, who they are as an individual, and adapting the way you communicate to the people you're talking to. This is applicable outside of, you know, trying to hear your voice heard as women versus men. This is applicable at all times, is that if you have an understanding of who you're talking to and how they are best going to hear what you have to say, then you'll be golden. It'll be much easier for them to hear what you have to say. And I always, if I know it's going to be a hard conversation to have and people aren't going to listen to me very well, or aren't going to hear my voice, I come with all the stats I need, all the proof I need, really have a way of saying, well, you know, it's hard for me to come up with an example that is actually applicable to your role, just because I'm not technically in that same, I don't have the same technical knowledge, but if you're walking somebody through a decision, versus you saying, I think this is best, you get them to see that that's what's best first. That's how you have those conversations, and that's how you again become invaluable to the room. And also, again, being a problem solver. If people know that if they have a problem, they can come to you, because you're just going to help them solve it, and they can be vulnerable with you and say, I need help. Women sometimes actually benefit from the fact that they're not seen as a threat. So people actually tend to come to women more and sometimes be vulnerable because we're not threatening. So seeing that and being able to take that knowledge and support that process and solve that problem again, just makes you invaluable. So I kind of rambled on. I hope I answered your question at least a little bit. Anything else?
Other questions? Feel free to talk or put it in the chat box. I have another interesting one because it kind of came out of a discussion we had 2 weeks ago. There was a young woman entrepreneur in the room. With everything that's going on with COVID and people who have established businesses trying to alter strategies to be able to, a lot of times as a small business, keep afloat at this point. For young women entrepreneurs who are looking and thinking about whether they want to start their own business, I know you've talked about some of the barriers, to overcome in this sector, but what advice would you give her? I mean, obviously the context of where it is and what they're doing, it will vary, but what advice would you give more broadly now in the environment that we're in and the new challenges that she may face? I think would be really helpful.
Yeah, so I actually, my advice does actually go a little bit back to the to-do list that I just walked through, in that understanding the landscape and connecting with individuals and being adaptable. I think as women entrepreneurs, the only way you're going to succeed in business is if you have products and services that are needed. And that's actually one of the reasons at WEConnect International is that we focus on connecting women entrepreneurs with these large contract opportunities, is because you may have something really awesome, but if nobody buys it, then you don't have a business. And so I think that understanding where the opportunity is for whatever it is you're making, whether it be a widget or if you are, providing a service, you need to understand who needs it, where they're located, and how you're going to find them, and what exactly, what problem you're solving for them. And so everything is changing. I think we all know that. COVID-19 and a global pandemic is something that, sure, there's a number of scientists that could have told us, the type of thing that we would see happen, but I don't think any of us could have imagined what this would look like for us. And it's completely changing the face of business as well, because everything's changing. So what everything looks like today, it's not going to look the same tomorrow, which doesn't look the same as yesterday. And so I think that as a woman entrepreneur, it's really important to follow that. I think one of the things that we have done a lot with, and again, we want to help women entrepreneurs actually sell the thing that they're doing. So when we go out to our buyers, so large corporations, like I mentioned before, like ExxonMobil, Procter & Gamble, Unilever, some of these really big corporations, and even some governments that we have connections with, when we go out to them and say, what do you need? And they say, we need masks, we need personal protection equipment, we need, thermometers. Then we can go to our women entrepreneurs and say, look, if you have the capacity to change your model right now to accommodate these things, then you'll be able to sell something and you'll be able to keep your doors open, so to speak. And so I think it's just really important to track what are the needs and how can you fill those needs. And I do have to say that, especially with women entrepreneurs, whether they're young or whether they've been, entrepreneuring, which is a word I just made up, for a really long time, then no matter what their status, typically it is at the core of that individual to, like I said before, see a problem and figure out how to solve it. That's where I think that the entrepreneurial spirit really comes from. So I think it's easier for entrepreneurs to take risks and to say, you know what, I was making widget X yesterday, but nobody needs widget X. I wonder what I could use those materials for, and just change course. People with entrepreneurial spirits are usually pretty good at that. And that's why they're so innovative. And that's why, frankly, they're so inspiring to me personally. So those are the types of things that I would recommend. And I would, kind of take the to-do list and reapply it in a way that makes a little more sense to a specific situation, but knowing the needs and then figuring out a way to fill those needs. It's always how entrepreneurs will serve themselves best.
Really, really reflective. I know that we have about 1 or 2 minutes left. If anybody has any other burning questions that you would like to ask, please do so.
Hello. I have a question. My name is Obani Vivian, and thank you so much, Miss Emily, for such a great presentation. Earlier before now, you mentioned about how it's really important to adopt the SDGs. Because this week, like we're celebrating the Global Week, 5 years anniversary of the Global Goal since introduction. So I feel that women entrepreneurs should know the value of SDGs and how they can adopt that in their businesses. Okay. Having the knowledge of that will help them know where or which of the targets they are trying to achieve by 2030. Okay, so I'm a passionate advocate of the United Nations SDGs. So I'm really volunteering to that effect on whichever field that I find myself possible. Okay, so one thing I'll also add to that is that a lot of women, unfortunately for me, I learned about the SDGs as an undergraduate, and I believe a lot of young women, a lot of girls are as well. Some of them don't even know what they involve in their communities, through their businesses, through whichever activities they're doing in their community. So how can that be adopted, okay, into any of the businesses owned by young women? How can those SDGs be introduced? How can it be adopted so that everyone can get involved, everyone can take action to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals? Thank you.
Yeah, so, and just so you're aware, you were cutting a little bit in and out. So I think I have an understanding of your question, which is really how can more people, especially women and women entrepreneurs, adapt the SDGs in their business, or adapt their business to help impact the SDGs. Am I reflecting that question correctly?
That's correct.
Great. Okay. Yeah. So I think it's a bit of a loaded question. I think there's a lot of ways to do it. I think that first and foremost, it's about the awareness of them. One of the things that we find at WEConnect International is that the work we do, especially as a nonprofit, is one piece of one of the SDGs. So we influence, SDG 5, which is around gender and gender equality. But within that goal, there are a number of what I consider just line items or bullets. And so women's economic empowerment is just one of those pieces within that goal. So I think first and foremost, it's about awareness of the goals. I think that one of the things I've spent my career doing, and I know this is now going to put us over time. So at any point, Jessica flagged for me that we need to just hang up the phone and I'll stop talking. But in my career, one of my biggest passions has been the intersection of nonprofits, corporations, and governments. Because if you're not all working toward the same thing, you're not going to be able to do anything. You will make no impact. You all need to be rowing the same direction. And what the SDGs give us, and this is why I'm also so passionate about them, is they give us the direction to row. They say we are going to focus on these things. And if we all focus on them together, we will make progress. And since the SDGs started, the progress has still been really slow. And it's because we don't have enough people. There are a lot of people and organizations still making progress toward them that they're just not tracking it. So sure, we'll set that subgroup aside, but we're not making enough traction on them. It's not moving fast enough. And so we need to figure out ways to get more people involved. And so I think that, like for us with our network of 10,000 women, and our corporate members who, we have over 100 now of corporations and large organizations that are part of our membership. We are constantly talking about the SDGs in our voice track. Everything we talk about, we bring it up because it's really important for everybody to first be aware of them. And then they have to figure out a way that they impact those goals. So I don't have the perfect answer. And frankly, I don't know that I have that answer right now, but I think the first thing is the more we talk about them and the more people that are aware of them and are aware of how important each of these pieces are in, again, just very simply making the world a better place. The more people we can get on board with that, the better. So I encourage each of you as individuals, you each have a voice, and we need to make it louder and louder. So tell everybody, make it a part of your daily conversations. My friends get a little frustrated with me when we're in social settings and all I can talk about are things like sustainable development goals and women's economic empowerment. But there's also a number of them who know a lot more now because of the fact that I've talked about it. And that's where we can all start as individuals. And then we have to figure out ways to amplify our voices. And we need really loud partners to do that. So large corporations, governments, they're the ones that will be able to speak, I think personally, the loudest on this. So we need to get them talking about it also, which is why I love having connections with corporations, is because they have a pretty powerful voice. And a lot of people know who a lot of these companies are. So if they say something, it helps get the word out. So again, I don't think that's the best answer to your question, but that's what I have today. And I think we all need to work really hard together to come up with better answers for that.
All right. Well, we are at time. So I want to, on behalf of the Zahara stream and everyone that joined today, to thank you, Emily, for giving us your wisdom and providing us your 5 to-do list items on top of not telling everyone it's luck. It is hard work. It's a lot of hard work. But yes, thank you again. And I see that you've put your email and, wanting to, again, keep sharing and keep building. So connecting on LinkedIn for all of those who are interested in connecting further. So yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you so much for the opportunity. I love the work that you all are doing. I think it's really important. And I hope to hear from those of you on the call at later dates. Let's figure out how to work together and how to solve some of these really big problems. I'm always available to chat and brainstorm and help come up with solutions. So please feel free to reach out to me at any point.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Emily.